Well, we are at that part of the season preview where I finally get to talk about the San Jose Earthquakes. And I believe this is probably the fifth time that I have done a season preview for the Quakes when their season started, which is by far more than any other team that I've ever done since I only started doing season preview of every single team just this season. But in terms of the Quakes and looking at last season, well, they finished with a record of 13-5-16, and they had 44 points, which was so close for them to potentially make the playoffs, but they missed out on the very last day when they lost to the Portland Timbers. They scored 51 goals, which was a bit of an improvement from last season, and definitely I think this is the first time they have scored 50-plus goal ever since their Supporters Shield winning season back in 2012. They conceded 52 goals, which was definitely a lot better than last season when we conceded like 70-plus goal, but it's still not good. I mean, anytime when you concede 50-plus goals, that's when you really have to ask questions about your defense and that you really need to maybe think about adding some addition to your defense because it's going to be right at that area where yeah, the defense could be an issue. Like anything below 50, then I think teams would be happy with their defense. But anything above 50 goals conceded in the season, that's when question needs to be asked. And goal differential, they had a -1 goal differential. And it's funny, last season, besides the fact that we were talking about whether or not if this team makes the playoffs. We were also kind of talking about the goal differential too, where sometimes we celebrate the fact that we got a positive goal differential, and then we kind of get a little bit ticked off the fact that our goal differential is back to negative. And unfortunately, we didn't able to finish the goal differential on a positive note, and that we actually gone in the negative zone, and that's all because when we lost 3-1 to the Timbers. Have we lost maybe by one or even tied that game, which doesn't actually get us to the playoffs either, we probably would have had a +1 goal differential, and I think this would be the first time in a while that the Quakes actually had a positive goal differential, because remember back in 2017, even though the team made the playoffs for their first time since that Supporters Shield winning year in 2012, that team was known as the team that infamously sneaked into the playoffs by the worst goal differential you will ever see a playoff team getting into the playoffs with a -22 goal differential. Now, last season summary, as I mentioned, they finished 8th in the Western Conference, came very close from making the playoffs. I mean, I know when you look at the standing, it says four points different between us and FC Dallas, and you wouldn't think it's that close. Well, if you want to kind of talk about last season, especially the final game of the season, where the final game of the season against the Timbers, that was virtually a play-in game. Like, whoever wins that game virtually is going to make it to the playoffs, and we were that close in terms of making the playoffs. And if we have won against the Timbers, and if we would have done some historic thing for the first time in club history by beating the Timbers at Providence Park, because for whatever reason, Providence Park is one of the couple of stadiums that we have never won before, and it's been kind of a curse ground for us. And, if we would have done something historical, we would have actually made it to the playoffs, and we would have got that 6th seed in the playoffs. And they also got knocked out in the 4th round of the U.S. Open Cup, where they lost to LAFC in that U.S. Open Cup game and lose 3-1 against them. Now, in terms of player that they add this year, well, that's been the big talking point for this offseason, and me included, like many Quakes fans, are not happy with some of the addition that the Quakes have made, mainly because they didn't really do much in terms of the offseason addition. They add Christian Espinoza on a permanent deal. That was a record deal where they, of course, got him for $3 million. They got Judson on a permanent deal, which that I really like. They also got a couple of homegrowns in Casey Wall and Emmanuel Ochoa, although both of them are one of them is a defender, which is Casey Wall, and Emmanuel Ochoa is a 15-year-old, or not 15-year-old, a 14-year-old goalkeeper, and is actually the youngest professional player to ever sign a professional contract in MLS since Freddie Adu did it a couple of years ago. Well, not a couple of years ago, but back in the early 2000s, where we all know the story about Freddie Adu having just an incredible start to his career, and he was a teenage sensation, only to the hype really kind of got to him, and that he never fulfilled his potential. And then probably the biggest addition we made this offseason was getting Oswaldo Alanes from Chivas, which I really hope that he can be a decent piece in our defense. I mean, I've been hearing some mixed reviews from fans and some negative reviews from Chivas fans saying that, well, he's basically the Mexican Humos and that he is slow and that he doesn't really provide a lot of quality, and he started to get a little bit older, which means that he has also started to kind of get a little bit washed up. But we shall see. I just hope that he, of course, will do well. This is a guy that was under the he did play under the Almeida system when he was at Chivas, or when Almeida was still in Chivas, and I'm pretty sure since he knows about this man marking system, this shouldn't be something that he needs to really adjust heading into our team. Now, in terms of players that was out of this team, Anibal Godoy, of course, went to Nashville, and I hate to mention this again, Nashville fans, if you're watching this season preview, but thank you very much for accepting the 600,000 allocation offer of Anibal Godoy, when clearly he is clearly nowhere near the $600,000 that the value is. I mean, I was thinking that we were probably gonna get rid of him, and we probably might at max get maybe 200,000 allocation money, or maybe let him walk on a free transfer to another club. But the fact that we were able to get 600,000 allocation money for Anibal Godoy, who, as I said in the Nashville season preview, as much as I know some fans might be excited about him, here's the one thing that I do warn about Nashville fans. He is a very frustrating player to watch, and especially there's just times where he can be very inconsistent, he can be very lazy, and he can also commit unnecessary fouls that gets him into trouble and pretty much gets him on thin ice for the rest of the game because he picks up a silly yellow card. But we shall see how he does in Nashville, and I definitely do wish him the best of luck at Nashville, but you've been warned in terms of the fact that you decided to pay a lot of allocation money and really overpay for a guy that has been it's just been one of the most frustrating player that you will ever see puts on a Quake shirt. And believe me, I have seen a lot of frustrating players to watch on this team. Kevin Partida is another guy that is no longer with the team. Same with Jimmy Ockford, Francois Affolter, and Harold Cummins. And we basically lost most of the depth in terms of the back line. And this is why heading into this offseason, there was a lot of question about the fact that we desperately need to try to address the back line and need to add some more depth in terms of it. Well, we did get Oswaldo Alanes, who we don't know whether or not if he's either going to be a starter of this team or is he going to be kind of like a bench player behind Youngworth and Cassia. But still, that back line still looks very, very thin. And the fact that we haven't really brought in some reinforcement, that makes me very nervous of what happened if either that back line crumbles during this season or the fact that somebody in that back line is going to get injured and we will have no replacement for them. Now, in terms of the goal scored for this team, I'm going to say Wando is going to be the main goal scored because, he's always been the main goal scored of this team for the last 15 or so year. But we know this is going to be the last year that we have to rely on him in terms of being the goal scored, because this is his farewell season with the Quakes. And, I definitely will enjoy Wando playing for the Quakes for the very last time. But at the same time, it's going to be a bittersweet kind of enjoyment seeing the captain playing with this club. And it's just such a shame that we absolutely wasted his career and that we didn't even get him anywhere close to get to an MLS Cup. And that the only thing that I think he'll remember in terms of his run, well, at least the good thing is at least he did win the MLS Cup with Houston when he was there. But the thing is, he wasn't really a big time kind of player, and that he's will always forever known as a Quakes legend. But it just feels like it's almost like the glass is kind of free quarter, well, not really free quarter, but maybe a quarter empty, with the fact that we didn't even give him a lot of playoff success, and we didn't even give him a MLS Cup appearance, doing his long year here as a Quakes player and just being such a legend that he is. Playmaker for this team, it's got to be Espinoza. I mean, Espinoza, if there is, out of all the guys that I would trust in terms of being a difference maker to this team, it's got to be Espinoza, and he's been showing that throughout last season, and that he of course led the team last season in assists. And speaking of which, MVP, it's going to be Christian Espinoza again, and we saw also last season the time when we did not have Espinoza, and especially near the end of the season where he was kind of suspended for a couple of games, and also so wasn't really a regular starter for this team because he was kind of injured a little bit. We saw the big impact that this team had when they did not have Espinoza, which is that attack just never looked the same. And I'm happy the fact that we were able to secure him on a permanent deal, because this offseason, if there's one thing that the Quakes absolutely at the bare minimum have to do this offseason, is sign Espinoza on a permanent deal, and the fact that they're able to do that is good on them. But it just also makes me worried, the fact that as much as I know Espinoza could potentially have a decent year, if nobody else on this team can be a decent playmaker besides him, that does make me a little bit concerned about the attack going forward too. Now, in terms of surprise package, I could have easily chose Tommy Thompson as the surprise package, because last season he really surprised me by playing in the right back row, and that at the beginning of the season I was just bewildered, the fact that I saw Tommy Thompson playing that spot, and I didn't think it fit his spot at all. But the more that he plays at that spot, the more comfortable he is, and he actually looked very decent in that fullback spot. So in many ways, we kind of found ourselves a fullback from a guy that doesn't actually play fullback, but kind of transition into that role. So I could have easily put him as a surprise package, but the real surprise package I'm going to put is going to be Judson, where I know Judson had some bad moment last season, and mostly it has to be in the beginning of the year, but I really think he was a decent player, and him and Jackson Yu really put up to be a good midfield partnership. And if there's one area that I'm not that concerned in terms of this team overall, is going to be in that midfield position, where I think we have a lot of good quality in the midfield in Jackson Yu and Judson, and they should really kind of control that spot, as long as if Judson can perform just like what he has done for the second half of the season. And that I just feel like as the season goes on, he just gets better and better, and it just gets to a point where this is a guy that at first I was kind of bewildered why the Quakes decided to sign him, and I thought he was gonna be like one of those classic Quakes player or one of those classic Quakes signing that we decided to sign somebody from the Brazilian second division, and he doesn't actually turn out well. Well, that is actually not true for Judson, and for once we actually kind of find a hidden gems in terms of that. What I like about this team, well, the players should feel more comfortable with the man marking system. I mean, this season, this is the second year under the Almeida man marking system, and in the first year they definitely started to be more comfortable as the season goes along. And the reason why they kind of collapsed late in the season is because this man marking system took a huge toll on this team. And I hope this season maybe Almeida learns that it's good the fact that he wants to continue to implement this man marking system, but there's got to be a way where he doesn't just run this team to the ground, and that there's got to be a ways where there's at least some sort of stability and at least some sort of sustainability, where this team will just not run out of gas by the end of the season. Because if it's going to be the case once again this year, where if this system is going to be sustainable enough, where if this system is not going to be sustainable enough to the end of the season, and if the Quakes get off to just an amazing start, but in the second half of the season they start to show regression and they're going to have a similar collapse to last season, that does makes me question about this man marking system, and that does kind of also make me question, does Almeida may have to either abandon that system, or the fact that he just needs to further address it. I mean, I know it sounds crazy for me to kind of criticize Almeida man marking system and even go as far as saying abandoning it, but if it doesn't work for 2 years in a row and we see the same resort of what we saw in the previous year, where this team literally just ran out of gas in August, and that for the rest of the year they just have nothing left in the tank to really compete, that is a huge issue, and that is kind of like the worst time you want to be running out of gas, and the worst time to just really start to be complacent and eventually collapse and not making the playoffs. Now, the one big question that I have with this team is, of course, the lack of signing. I mean, the lack of signing, I'm worried that it's going to hurt the Quakes' progression. And when you look at the lack of signing and you look at our squad, the one area, well, there are a couple of areas that I feel like we need to bring more signings to address some of the weakness. I think right now the biggest problem we have might actually not be attack. Originally, I thought the attack was one of the key area that we really need to strengthen up. And granted, yes, that area I think we still need to be strengthened, but I'll get to that. But the one area that I feel like we really need to strengthen up, and we really desperately need some more signings, either during the last couple of days of the preseason or during the summer transfer window, is we need to get some defenders in this team. Like, I mean, when you look at all the players that we lost this offseason, most of them are pieces that are supposed to be part of the depth chart in our back line. And the fact that we could be facing a situation this year where if one or two of our center backs goes down, we might be either have to rely on a player on our team that's going to be playing in an unnatural position to play in that center back role to cover our center back shortage, which is definitely not recommended, or call up one of the young guys from Reno 1868, or maybe even call up some young guys from our academy to basically step in there, even though they are not ready to potentially play and get some MLS minute. Hopefully, we won't get to that situation, and the best way to not get to that situation is either get some defensive reinforcement in these last couple of days in the preseason, or do it in the summer transfer window. I mean, I just don't see how we can have this kind of defensive structure, and that we might not have to face the dire situation that I just mentioned if we're not going to bring some reinforcement during this season. So, yeah, I'm hoping defensive reinforcement is something that we desperately need to address in the summer. And the other thing that we need to address in the summer, as I mentioned, is the attack, which is something that I've been kind of saying it for a long time with the Quakes. It feels like every season it's been me always talk about the attack that needs some more improvement, even though some people will say, well, you scored 51 goals this season, which is the most that the Quakes have scored in the past couple of years. Why are you saying you need some more attacking reinforcement? Well, that's because some of our attacker and some of our playmaker is not very consistent, and that besides Christian Espinoza as the consistent playmaker on this team, we don't really have another guy that I really trust to be the difference maker and can really step into that role. I mean, when you look at guys like Vako and Eriksson, they are decent kind of playmakers on this team, but here's the thing. They're very inconsistent. I mean, I remember Vako last season, he really turned it up during the middle of the season, and that's when the Quakes were really at their peak of their power during last season and were really playing their best last season. And everybody was talking about how he, of course, have rediscovered his form. And then as soon as August hit, he completely dropped off a cliffhanger and really just return back to the Vako we know, where he's not really producing anything and he's kind of being a little bit lazy. And the same goes with Eriksson, where Eriksson, he can have times where he had he kind of pops up and have some moment of magic throughout the season, but he doesn't do it in a very consistent rate, and that most of the times he either being very lazy going forward on the attack or make the wrong decision or the wrong pass when he's going forward on the attack. So, yeah, I mean, besides Espinoza, we don't really have a reliable playmaker, which is why in the summer we got to maybe find that reliable playmaker and find that designated player number 10 that we desperately need. I mean, we have a DP spot open, and that I think that DP spot clearly needs to be used in that number 10 row, and hopefully in this summer transfer window, the front office might be thinking about getting that. And then also going forward, you know, we need to eventually replace Wando. Obviously, I don't trust Houston at all in terms of being the replacement for Wando. Maybe a couple of years ago when he came into this league, I might have trust Houston to be the replacement because he was outstanding when he came to the Quakes. But since that and every year that he's been with the Quakes, he has just continued to decline and decline in terms of his goal scoring productivity. And last season was really at the lowest point where, you know, he only scored like a couple of goals, and then after, I think the last goals that he scored was against RSL in July, and after that, he basically just disappeared. Like, he didn't even score another goals, and if you're a striker and you go half a season without a goal, yeah, you are clearly not good enough, and that you're definitely not going to be the future in terms of trying to cover for Wando once he retire at the end of the season. So, hopefully the Quakes have a plan in terms of that, and I just also hope that this Wando situation, eventually if we replace him, you know, we actually get a decent player, or we actually get a player to replace him. We don't want something similar to what Montreal is dealing right now, where they just lost Piatti, and they right now don't know if they, of course, are going to get a reliable replacement for him. I mean, they did get a deal off of that Piatti deal when they transfer him back to Argentina and got a guy that is relatively unknown but could potentially have the same quality of Piatti, but he's relatively unknown, and that's probably the most important thing we have to read about that. So hopefully this won't happen when the Quakes, once Wando retire and the Quakes don't have a plan to how to replace Wando, because if they don't have a plan to replace Wando, I think this attack is gonna really suffer, because Wando last season was really the key player on that attack, and he remains still our main goal scorer off this team. But either way, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. What do you think of the addition that we made this offseason, even though we didn't make a lot of addition? What do you think of the players that were out this season, which, you know, most of the players that we lost this season are either not good enough or they're pieces on the back line that we lost? Who do you think is going to be the goal scorer, playmaker, MVP, and the surprise package? What do you like about this team, and what is one big question that you have with this Quakes team? But other than that, you know, this season, I have no idea how the Quakes are going to do. I mean, the Quakes could be like last season, where they started off poor and then had a great run before kind of ran out of gas because of the man marking system demand too much on their fitness and just collapse. Or they could be like 2018, where, yeah, I don't really need to remind you what happened in 2018, because that was very, very painful year to be a Quakes fan. But either way, hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys next time.